Welcome to the Tepper School of Business Multimedia Series. For more information on the Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon, please visit us at www.tepper.cmu.edu/multimedia. And now, here's your selected video.
Mr. Edward Coleman is currently the CEO and the Chairman of the Board of Directors at Unisys Corporation. Prior to this, he's held various senior management roles. He was the CEO of Gateway before it was acquired by Acer. He led the expansion of Arrow Electronics. He was also the CEO of CompuCom. He's worked with IBM for over 17 years in various senior executive positions. He's on the board of advisors of the William & Mary School of Business, and he has an MBA from Carnegie University. Please welcome Mr. Edward Coleman.
Oh, what a nice pleasure to be here this afternoon. I spent the morning at the School of Computer Science, and I'm not a computer scientist, so this feels much more natural to me to be with the business school, but I'm sure there's a lot of double majors and the like in here as well, so I'll try and be suitably technical when I can. What I thought I'd do over the next few minutes is tell you a little bit about Unisys and the challenges that we've been facing over the last couple of years in turning the business around. Then talk a bit about where we think future growth is going to come for both our company and for the IT industry more generally. Hopefully not take too much time with all that, and then open it up to your questions that you may have about career planning or what it is that might be on your mind. So I'll make it very open and fairly informal. I've learned in a lot of town halls in different companies that when you open it up for questions, it can take a long time to get the first question sometimes. And I'm very comfortable with silence, so I can wait anybody out to get some questions. So let me just start a little bit about Unisys. I joined it in fall of 2008. It's a company of 23,000 employees approximately around the world that specializes in providing mission-critical, what we would consider to be mission-critical services and solutions and technology to a wide variety of clients. About half our business is public sector. Next largest sector would be financial services, then airlines, and then telecommunication companies and the like. Mission-critical solutions in the areas of security, data center, end-user support, and application modernization. So we specialize in those areas where clients can't afford to go down. It's a company with a rich history. The antecedents of the company go back to 1886, and among some of its technical innovations, if you will, and maybe you don't think they're that technical anymore, but the first commercial typewriter, the first commercially viable adding machine, the first aeronautic gyroscope, and artificial horizon. And more recently, although still quite distant, would be the first large-scale general-purpose computer that was called the ENIAC, developed in 1946 at the University of Pennsylvania. So rich history, a lot of big personalities have been through the company. The names of the founders like Remington, which was a typewriter, Burroughs, which was the adding machine and still continues to be a force in the banking industry. Former chairman of the company was General Douglas MacArthur at one time. Leslie Groves, who led the Manhattan Project in World War II, was a senior executive of one of the antecedent companies at one time. So a rich history, and also a very impressive present, I would say, in terms of the work that we do. If any of you have been to Beijing recently, the new Terminal 3 at Beijing International Airport, Unisys was the master system integrator for that. More recently, master system integrator for the New Delhi International Airport. Currently in the process of implementing the National Identification Card Program in Mexico for 100 million Mexican citizens. 30% of the air cargo in the world is shipped utilizing Unisys systems. Over $3 billion, excuse me, 3 billion transactions of financial transactions occur annually on the SWIFT interbank messaging service, all running on Unisys platforms. So a wide variety of large-scale mission-critical applications and solutions around the world. So it's got a rich history. It has a lot of important work that it's doing in the present. And yet, in the fall of 2008, the company was in some severe difficulty. It had been several years since it had had a full year of profitability. A number of the clients were wondering if we were committed to staying in the technology business that they ran their companies on. And perhaps most challenging was a significant debt issue where we had a large amount of debt coming due near term. At the same moment, in October of 2008, when the credit markets, post the Lehman Brothers failure, just stopped operating. So the idea that you kind of come into that situation, you have to be fairly quick, I think, to decide how you're going to approach it. And so what we did as a management team is make a couple of major decisions very early on that you may think are somewhat philosophical, but they are really important. And the first one was a question of whether or not we were a company that was in the midst of a transformation, or was it a turnaround? Because the company had a little bit of a feeling that it was in year 5 of a 3-year transformation. So we quickly decided that this really wasn't a transformation because we weren't in bad businesses. We were actually in pretty good businesses. It was really a failure to execute effectively, which is really what a turnaround's all about. So we put 3 principles in place to guide our efforts. The first was that we were going to build on strength, not try and be all things to all people, but build on where the company really had significant core capability, good customer references, profitable business. The second principle was that turnaround is a team sport, that there's no opportunity and there's no time for people building individual fiefdoms or acting like prima donnas. We are all in this together. And a working principle around the table was teamwork is defined as, I will not let you fail. And we would look at each other and say, I will not let you fail, and have that same response coming back. And then the third principle that we had was that in a services and solutions business, the only long-term differentiation that one has is the quality of service as perceived by the customer. Everything else can be asserted, it can be claimed, but real differentiation comes from the clients telling you that in fact you're different and better. So based on those principles, we put in place a 4-part strategy. The first was to narrow our focus and concentrate our resources more effectively. We had, I think, been trying to be too many things to too many people in too many places and spread ourselves too thin. So we selected 4 areas where we thought we were building on strength. Those are the 4 I talked about earlier: security, data center, end-user support, and application modernization. The second part of the strategy was to assure that we are building differentiated value propositions in each of those 4. Could we really enhance the solutions to the point where they were, in fact, delivering different value, better value, more value to our clients in those 4 areas? The third part of the strategy was our cost of service delivery was roughly 5 percentage points higher than the competition. So we took on the challenge at the time to reduce that 5 points, to reduce our cost of service delivery by $250 million over the span of 12 months. And we did that through a combination of increased automation in our service delivery, overall fine-tuning of the metrics that you use to measure service delivery, and increased use of both offshore and nearshore capabilities and talent. And then the fourth part of the strategy was to reduce our overhead, which was also about 5 percentage points higher than our competition, another $250 million. So we worked hard to reduce that, first of all, by breaking up a very complicated and overly bureaucratic matrix management system that we had in the company. We were managing the company through 4 business units, 5 industry verticals, 5 geographic regions, 5 strategic program offices, and a corporate change management office. Each of these dimensions with its own senior management and supporting staffs. And I will tell you, the first staff meeting I went to, where all these folks descended to present how they were doing, was a nightmare, because the whole thing was spent with management arguing with each other as to whose numbers were right. And secondly, if anything good had happened, everybody was raising their hand to take credit. And if something had gone wrong, everybody was kind of saying, well, you know, I did my bit, but that guy didn't do his. So it had become a very inwardly focused organization. So we broke apart that matrix, decided to operate the business by business unit, line of service, and get after that excess overhead, as well as just being cost conscious on everything. And Bob Supnick, our Vice President of Engineering, who's a very talented guy, will attest to the cost consciousness that we put in place. But the net result of all that was we became profitable in 2009 for the full year for the first time since 2004, I believe. And we continued that in 2010 with another solid year of profitability. And perhaps more importantly, the fact that we were able to turn this quickly into a profit-generating enterprise as opposed to a loss-making enterprise gave us the flexibility to refinance a portion of that debt in July of 2009 and then generate enough cash to start paying the debt down. So one of the things that I'm proudest of, and I think our company is proudest of, is that we ended 2010 with more cash than debt for the first time in the company's history, which I shouldn't say that. We went back as far as 1974, and we couldn't find a time when the company had more cash than debt, and we stopped looking at that point. So, and then at the same time, people would say, well, gosh, if you're cutting costs and making that kind of an improvement, it must be at the expense of customer satisfaction. But in reality, our customer satisfaction, service quality metrics are as high as they've ever been, if not higher. And the customers are relieved that, in fact, we have re-engaged with them on the technology business, which is so critical to them, reinvested in that business, reaffirmed our commitment to it, and increased our engineering headcount associated with that business by about 30%, at the same time that we were making all these cost reductions and improving the efficiency of the business. So profits are up, customer satisfaction's up, cash is up, and the customer feeling about us as a company is much changed. Because I'll tell you, it's very hard to sell in an environment, to sell a 5-year contract when customers are worried if you're going to be in business 12 months from now. So changing that whole sense of company viability and profitability was hugely important to begin to get the customers to re-engage. So we've made a lot of progress. We think we've done a lot of good work in terms of improving the profitability of the company, improved the cost structure, improved the balance sheet. We've improved the revenue growth in some of those areas I described to you. But we still have yet to prove that we can grow the business overall on a sustained basis. So that's the big challenge that we have both in 2011 and beyond. Because our objectives for the next 3 years are to demonstrate growth with the industry for the next 3 years, improve our pre-tax profits by probably another 75%, continue to pay off another 75% of the debt, while again exceeding customer expectations on service quality. But growth is our key. So let me take a second and use that as a segue to talk about what I think is going to generate our growth and at the same time maybe generate the industry's growth. So I'm coming to my paper here because I want to make sure I read this quote correctly, because I think it's one of my favorites. And this is Peter Drucker, so I'm allowed to use Peter Drucker quotes in the Tepper School, right? So Drucker wrote, "Finally, in a modern economy, whether developed or developing, distributive channels change rapidly. More rapidly, as a rule, than either technology or customer expectations and values. Indeed, I've never seen a decision with respect to distributive channels," and I think he's using that, I don't think we use the word distributive anymore, but distribution channels, think distribution channels, or business models. "Indeed, I've never seen a decision with respect to distributive channels that was not obsolescent 5 years later and badly in need of new thinking and fundamental change." So 5 years. I mean, 5 years goes by like that. I mean, I will tell you, 5 years goes by quickly. Drucker wrote that in 1964. So, I mean, we think a lot about how quickly things change today. And maybe it is changing fast. But 5 years wasn't much time in 1964 to think about looking at your business and assessing whether or not your distribution channels or your business model was 5 years old. And if so, he would say, you're probably out of date and looking in the rearview mirror. So an example of that, PC industry. I spent some time, as you were kind enough to note, in the PC industry, which is pretty fast changing. If you go back to the early 80s, the leader in the PC industry was Apple, with the Apple II. And Apple II lost that leadership to IBM, really as the basis of competition changed from sort of the hobbyist to corporate credibility and the availability of software. IBM in turn lost leadership in the PC industry to Compaq as the basis of competition changed quickly to price performance and portability. Then Compaq lost leadership in the industry to Dell, as the basis of competition shifted once more to direct fulfillment, configured to order. Then Dell lost leadership in the PC industry to HP, as the basis of competition changed from desktops to notebooks. Why is that important? If I have a notebook, I want to see it, touch it, hold it before I buy it, because it's a bit of a style statement. And that became important because the way you got that experience was through retail. And HP had a retail channel, and Dell did not. So Dell lost leadership to HP. And now, here comes Apple again, 30 years later, through a marriage of telephony, mobility, applications, entertainment, and the PC, to reestablish leadership. So, I mean, this thing has gone around, 5 times in 30 years. And I would argue that what allows companies to go from being king of the hill one day to sort of run-of-the-mill not too shortly thereafter is the basis of competition changes, and the business models don't change with it. So what's changing the basis of competition in the IT industry today, which is a threat, but it's also an opportunity, right? And we want to make it an opportunity. So what we see is the things that are changing the basis of competition, not just in the IT industry, but also for our customers in their industries, or several, and I'll say 5 or 6. Cloud computing. I think we all know what's happening there. The consumerization of IT and the increased use of mobility, which is changing how enterprises are interacting with their customers. I mean, every bank in the world is trying to figure out, how do I do mobile banking? How do I let my bank customer know when he's within 150 yards of my branch or my ATM? Social networking is going from being a marketing tool to the way people interact, enterprises interact with their consumers. I think Delta is a good example of this, where I think they were the first one to issue airline tickets through Facebook. But they're opening up these applications and changing the way they do business. Smart computing and deep business analytics, changing the way people are processing this enormous amount of information that's available to reach new conclusions about their customers and their markets. Phenomenal stuff. And CMU, I know, is right in the middle of that with the sponsorship of wasnt. I mean, how many of y'all watched wasnt on Jeopardy? Everybody? I mean, that's really pretty phenomenal stuff. Really incredible stuff. Cybersecurity is an issue everywhere. And these forces all coalesce together in a lot of different ways. So mobility and social networking has impacts on cybersecurity and what you have to do there, has huge impacts on opening up applications. So from an IT industry standpoint, tremendously game-changing in terms of opportunity. And from our customer perspective, potentially game-changing within their industries as well. So the way we look at it within Unisys is we're not the biggest, but what we want to do is be the best at providing mission-critical solutions. And we think that as these forces, these disruptive forces kind of ripple through the industry in terms of cloud, consumerization, mobility, social networking and the like, the basis of competition can change yet again. And if we're adept enough, agile enough, quick enough, capable enough, we can take advantage of that and use that as a springboard to reassert industry leadership in our own industry. So we think it's a very exciting time to be in the IT industry, both for ourselves and for our clients. And we believe those are the factors that will power us into this phase of growth that's really the final step that we need to demonstrate to ourselves, our shareholders, and our customers to be able to assert once and for all that our turnaround is complete. So it's a journey and process. We've made, I think, enormous strides, but we still have much to do. And my guess is you'll never talk to anyone, or no one will ever be presenting to you that says that the work is done, because it's always changing. So let me stop there and open it up for questions or comments. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that Unisys has built up excess cash on the balance sheet, and I'm just curious, what kind of opportunities do you see in the future going forward to put that excess cash to work?
I never used the word excess. I said we had. I said we ended the year with more cash than debt, which is not a bad thing to have. So I wouldn't call it excess. What we're doing so far this year, though, is we just issued a mandatory convertible preferred stock offering that we're using to reduce our debt by about $200 million. And at the same time, in conjunction with that, we initiated a tender, a cash tender, for, I believe, up to another $200 million of debt that's coming due. So the debt that we took on as a part of that restructuring was very expensive debt. It's like 14% debt. So we feel like the best use of our money at this point, best sure return we can get, is to reduce that 14% debt. Yes, sir.
You spoke about trying to, in 2008, trying to improve the quality and differentiation of your products, and at the same time reducing the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
Does this seem like a little bit opposing forces? Yeah. How did you manage that and then still come up with achieving both goals?
Well, I mean, they are opposing forces, and I think the one thing that that's always true is that you're dealing with opposing forces all the time, and there are no 100% calls that you make. You make trade-offs all the time. But the cost of having a commodity service and the cost of customer problems exceeds the cost of making the investments to avoid those, I think. So a good example, we made the decision that our IT outsourcing business, we needed to improve the value we're bringing to our clients to be more competitive, to differentiate it more. So we wanted all of our global operations centers to be ISO 20000 compliant, which means that they're ITIL compliant, IT information library, sort of the best practices for IT service delivery. So we made the investment to get all of our operating centers there to make sure that we could deliver the consistent quality of service around the globe to our global clients. And if we do that, if we deliver consistent quality, we won't have to encourage the expense of fixing problems. So we did that, and we think we're the first and still the only global IT outsourcer to be ITIL compliant in all of its operating centers around the world. But it went back to that first, one of those three principles I talked about, is that service quality is the only long-term differentiation you have. So once you start with some bedrock principles, you start acting on those and build on them. And then other stuff kind of falls out of that. So we felt like there was plenty of cost reduction opportunities, but there also was the need to improve that service quality. So you just do both and grind harder. That probably wasn't a very satisfying answer, but you just work harder to do both.
Yeah. You talked about the transformation strategy. You said that Unisys decided to sing for businesses' strength, and then you went about how you can add value proposition. For me, strategically, step two doesn't come in the first, or if not, then what is the basis to decide which will come?
The way we decided on the four was not particularly scientific. And again, time was not our friend in this case, so we need to make some decisions quickly. But we went through all the different things we did as a company and looked at those areas where we had good customer references, where we felt we had good skills, profitable business today, and there are parts of the industry that are growing. So when we put everything that we did through those four filters, those were the areas that fell out: security, data center, end-user support, application modernization. They represented about 80% of what we did as a company. The other 20% we kind of put over here on the side into a maintain category. We weren't going to invest in those. Or if opportunities arose for a good return on a divestiture, we would take a look at divesting. So we've sold off, as a part of that, over the last couple of years, we've sold off a remittance processing business, a Medicaid processing business, a life insurance BPO business in the UK, our check processing equipment business, and 2 or 3 smaller ones. But it's really that, four-dimension filter that we put those things through.
So, in respect to cloud computing, that is the biggest creative feature, for example, for Unisys. How do you see the business evolving? Some companies are getting into private cloud centers, others are getting into public kind of shared services for a long company. How is Unisys positioning itself in that?
Well, I think we start with the presumption again that our business is about mission-critical solutions and delivered to an enterprise. So you look at the way enterprises, how we believe enterprises will acquire cloud computing capability. And we think it will be through, in some cases, public cloud, some cases, private cloud, and in many, many cases, a hybrid of the two, where you need to have a management system in place that allows you to move computing resources from private into public and back again. And we participate in all of those today. I mentioned our cargo system. About a third of the air cargo in the world runs on our platform. Half of that is on customer installations. About half of that's in our cloud outside of Minneapolis. And we think it's one of the excellent examples of a mission-critical software as a service, public cloud opportunity. So I think it's going to be all of the above.
Yes, sir. You mentioned that you had to transform a company which had complex matrix organization and make it more agile and efficient to execute. How does it balance against the culture that already exists with like 25,000 employees?
That's a great question. One, I don't like the word transformation, because I don't think we really transformed anything. This was really about improving execution and focusing the company better. Culture is a really interesting thing. And the culture, the biggest cultural impact I think we had was thinking in terms of who and what we are as a company. So Unisys the name Unisys comes from the merger in 1986 of Burroughs and Sperry Rand. And the intent was to create a giant that could compete with IBM. Okay? And that was a lot of the sense that was still there in the company, which was now a much smaller company. I think when the merger first occurred, it was 120,000 employees. Today we're 23,000. We're about $4 billion in revenue versus $12 billion then. So the idea that you had a company culture that thought it was competing with IBM and Accenture, these huge giants, was really a disconnect with reality. And it caused the company and the people in the company to feel kind of like failures, I think. Because when you try and compete at that level, when you don't have the oomph to do it, all you do is spend money and feel good if you come in second, right? And that's really not a recipe for business success. So a lot of what we were doing was trying to redefine who and what we were, to make people realize that we are a mid-sized technology company. That doesn't mean bad, it just means mid-size. And we can be the best mid-sized technology and services company out there. But we need to be competing not against IBM and Accenture, but the rest of the industry. And we do compete with them from time to time, and if we're selective in when we compete, we can win, and do win. But one of the things I like to remind people of is the IT services industry is so incredibly fragmented that you can take IBM, HP EDS, Accenture, Computer Sciences Corporation, Infosys, Tata, and Wipro. Add them all up, and they account for 18.5% of the market. So you don't have to beat them to be successful. You have to beat the other 82%. Win business in the other 82%. So changing that was important. The other thing that we're still fighting through now, fighting is probably too strong a word, but working on now is this culture of growth. That the company had declined for so many years on the top line that it assumes that's normal. So changing that to the point where people begin to believe that we can grow again. So Bob Supnick runs our technology business, head of engineering. Our main product is called ClearPath. And we consider it to be an open mainframe environment, has considered in the industry to be the most reliable, secure, scalable, open mainframe in the industry. But it hadn't grown for 10 plus years. Well, we grew it last year 5% for the first time since 1999. And in large measure, it's because Bob put a plan in place with his team that changed the mantra from defend and protect to defend, protect, and grow. And it made a huge difference to the whole team and the sales team that was representing it. It was really pretty cool. I know it's harder than that. It's harder than changing the bumper sticker, but culture is awfully important. So I think we're developing a can-do culture, and the idea that the company can be profitable, can generate cash, can have more cash than debt, can grow, is all a part of that change. And to me, that's what's wonderful about situations like this, because usually there's some strategic issues to deal with, there are a lot of operational issues to deal with, and there's cultural issues to deal with. And as a manager or executive or a leader, that's really a chance to exercise, I think, kind of every management muscle you have, all at the same time. I think it's tremendously energizing and fun. A little scary at times, but fun. Yes, sir.
As we hear, it's like Unisys is more focused towards mission-critical applications or the industry process. Now, how do you take care of the confidence of the client, being a company which has downsized and not working properly before 2008 and now taking up a step again, but satisfying the mission-critical business for a business?
Yeah. I think the capability to deliver those mission-critical solutions was always there. And I think the performance and delivery was always there. What caused our customers concern were really two things. There was a question that as the company shifted its focus towards services, was it going to de-emphasize the technology, particularly the ClearPath technology that many of these large institutions ran their business on? That caused them a concern. And then when the company wasn't making money, they questioned viability of the company. So those two together are sort of a dangerous combination, right, from a client perspective. So they never questioned the capability. They questioned the business performance and the strategy. So I think once we address the strategy and say we are absolutely committed to this platform and continuing to enhance and grow it, we took care of that issue. And then when we started making money and strengthened the balance sheet, we took care of the other issue. So I was in London last week for a reception for 45 clients. It's amazing how many of them have been clients for 35, 40, 45 years. And it's so refreshing from 2 years ago. Last week, we're talking about the clients and their problems versus 2 years ago, they were asking about what's going on with Unisys. So we can get back into the conversation that's much more productive and positive. And they welcome that. Yes, sir.
When you're going around and shrink costs, you're talking about increasing engineers by 30% and increasing our revenue by $250 million. How do you do that? Is that mostly through management cuts or restructuring?
Lots of different things. In total, so if you put the cost of service and the overhead stuff together, it's about a $500 million reduction in a span of about 12 months. About a third of that was people, and a lot of that was unwinding that matrix management structure I described. So a third of it was people. A third of it was real estate. We had far too much excess real estate. And a third of it was third-party spend, just money that we were spending on other suppliers and providers for a variety of services and products. So about a third, a third, a third. And it's one of those things where you kind of start looking for big opportunities, but then as you get through those, you find something else, and then something else. And it really, I find it to be a very constructive exercise because people start thinking more frugally and more efficient, and you can start taking cost out that really doesn't affect anybody in a negative way. I'll give you a silly example. But this is a good example. I do come from the PC industry at one time. You don't spend money in the PC industry that you absolutely don't have to spend. So you go into this first set of staff meetings, and there's a pile of PowerPoints being handed out. It's like we're a technology company. We got PCs, we got screens. Why are we handing out piles of paper? Then the cover sheet of every presentation, Unisys colors are red and white. The cover sheet of every presentation is a white piece of 8.5 by 11 paper painted red with Unisys in white. It's kind of like, what are we doing? We ought to hate red ink around this place. And why are we painting? Why are we spending money on red ink? To have a pretty cover sheet on a presentation we should never print to begin with. So maybe that's silly, but it's real. And I can guarantee you, Michael Dell would never let a red cover sheet in his building. So you just start kind of giving, you take a swag at some big stuff, You also make people realize that you're looking at little stuff and get everybody conscious about, do I really need to spend this money? We grounded the corporate jet. I mean, here we were, a company losing money like we were with a G4 and a helicopter. Right? And what are we doing? I never had a G4 and a helicopter before. In my first week, I got a ride out to California on it and back for a customer briefing. Asked the pilot, how much did we spend on this? He says, well, the fuel is about $25,000. $25,000, my gosh. I am a valuable cat, you know? So we had a staff meeting the next week, and I said to everybody, your job is to never let me fly on that plane again, because if you do, I'll rationalize why we should keep it. But right now, I am strong enough. At this one moment, I am strong enough to say no. But don't tempt me, right? And so we grounded the jet, got rid of the helicopter. And culturally, that had a big impact. Because people around the company were having trouble understanding, why are we being asked to save? Why are we cutting jobs? And the execs are flying around on a G4. But again, that was a question of, that was like acting like you're IBM. That was part of acting like you're IBM when you're not, right? So where I want to act like IBM and be better than IBM is in providing mission-critical solutions in those areas where we're really strong and we can compete head-to-head and win. Where I don't want to act like IBM is spend money as if I have that kind of resource behind me. So it's a lot of different things, but it all kind of adds up. Yes, sir?
In terms of revenue growth, where do you see the largest opportunities?
Yeah, so far we're seeing good growth in our IT outsourcing business. It's really done well and is growing for us outside the federal government for the last 12 months. And the value propositions around cost savings still continues to resonate with clients. And the advent of all these new consumer devices that CIOs are wrestling with how to support is also driving a lot of that as well. So I think that's a good growth area for us. Security is a very good one for us. I mentioned the Mexican project we're doing with their national ID program, but we do a lot of work in customs and border protection, both in the United States and around the world. That's a significant growth area as well. And I think application modernization, as companies have to take these legacy applications, even if everything's fine about them and they work well, they need to open them up so they can accommodate these new devices and new ways of doing business against those applications. Introduce social networking capabilities into those applications, or at least the interfaces. So the ability, and we think reuse of applications is going to be a big part of this, how you open them up so you can reuse the application but marry it with all these new technologies is an important growth area for us.
Yes, sir. One last question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You talked about growth of the company. Is part of that growth going to come from technology innovation, and if so, is that something you can foster in-house or something that Unisys will acquire from outside?
Well, some of it will come from technology innovation. Some of it we do in-house. Some of we think the most leading edge stuff that we're doing from a technology standpoint includes what we call secure partitioning within the Intel Xeon space, taking what was sort of mainframe class partitioning down to an industry standard world. So a lot of that will develop in-house, but we rely heavily on partners and the ability to open up those platforms to accommodate and make use of innovation that's coming from across the industry. So the biometric work that we're doing in Mexico, we didn't develop the biometric technology, but we're very good and adept at integrating that into a solution for the client. Yes, sir.
I was just curious, what do you attribute Unisys' success to in certain industries versus others? For example, is it due to strategic positioning in those industries, or is it more of high visibility of compatibility of your products and services with the need of that industry?
I'd say it's probably the latter, and in many cases historic. That the company really was founded in the relationship that we had in providing high-end, mission-critical mainframe computing solutions that supported transaction-oriented businesses, be it banking, be it airlines, be it the IRS. So heavy transaction workloads is kind of where this company really started. And it's kind of grown out from that. But some of those industry verticals and those industry strength remains the same. Telcos, we do a lot of voicemail messaging systems for telcos based on that same technology. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah.